first start with the liner notes introduction. As a creator of music, I feel some sort of great responsibility towards the public, the listener, the fan. That is true. I make music, and when I share this music, I feel I have kind of a responsibility because, if you give your time to listen to my music, and the thing I'm saying now is not in the liner notes, but if you give your time and listen to my music, then I feel it's my responsibility to give you a time as good as possible. It will not always happen. Some people might dislike my music, of course, but I will try to do my best making the best music I can to then present it to you and hope that you like it. So I have the great responsibility towards the public, the listener, the fan. Because this project is so dear to me, I really felt the need of making these liner notes. These are presented as a collection of visions, feelings, and inside information, documenting everything involved in the production process of discovery. Discovery is the name of the project, and the artist, my alias, is called Anomaly, hoping to inspire others and share some behind-the-scenes material. So that's the main reason why I shared all these inside information, is because I want to inspire others, not only with the music itself, but also by giving you inside information. And if you're a musician, then it might be very useful listening to what was going on in my mind and how I made it and why and stuff like this. So let me continue. The idea, the concept, being intrigued by outer space, exploration, and the void. I wanted to take both sound design and concept to the next level, without deviating too much from my minimalistic signature sound. Early at the conceptualization stage, it became clear that I would be working with samples. By dissecting them, reshaping them, and using these processed samples as rhythmical foundations for every track. I experimented with samples, or as I prefer to call them, audio fragments, on some of my earlier work, but they were more like icing on the cake than fundamental to those tracks. I experimented with samples, or as I prefer to call them, audio fragments, on some of my earlier work, but they were more like icing on the cake rather than fundamental to the tracks. I'm actually not so fond. I was not so fond on using samples, mainly because I get more fulfillment out of creating everything from scratch. So, creating everything from scratch, I will take a note there, is actually making sound using synthesizers or recording sounds with microphones, and then working with these sounds. So first there is nothing because I use those samples in such a way that they become totally different, and the sample itself is actually like an audio generator rather than something I use like it is. Now I kind of become fond of using samples, but at the time when I wrote this in 2015, I was not fond of using samples, and I didn't do it much, but I really changed my mind and opinion about using samples with this album and the tracks I made later on. So, right before I started the project, NASA released hundreds of royalty-free audio fragments on their SoundCloud page. SoundCloud is a platform for musicians to enjoy and share music. I frequently used space and space exploration as a theme when it comes to my productions. So I took these samples as an opportunity to tie my past, present, and future together in one big work of art. And so began the project called Discovery. And then I've got a picture of one of my instruments. These are sort of guitar pedals by Moog, and I use them standalone and with synthesizers. You can take a closer look if you have the liner notes when you buy the album. Then you can have a closer look at these pictures. A good preparation is half the work. I live by these words as they're absolutely true. All deciding factors on how this album was going to sound and feel were made in the first few weeks during the preparation. First, I selected over 100 audio fragments, 127 to be exact, which is the maximum number of samples my drum machine can fit into a single project. All these samples were all loaded into the memory of my Electron analog rhythm drum machine. An amazing instrument that has a sample engine on top of an analog engine. Many possibilities, all very inspiring. I started creating kits of processed audio fragments one by one. And a kit drummers call their snares and toms and all their material, they call it a kit because it's a combination of all these different sounds. So a drum kit is a combination of different drum sounds or sounds, and I made kits out of these samples to use them like you would use a drum set, a drum kit. So I started creating kits of processed audio fragments one by one. This already had a big influence on how everything was going to sound and feel like. The sound design was all done in the sample engine of the analog rhythm drum machine. The number of samples available per project is limited, like mentioned before, but still more than enough, especially when tweaking and processing those samples in different ways. An important philosophy is limitation that's very, yeah, that encourages you to be creative and, experiment, try things out until things work and give you great results. So, limitations also mean something is simple, and when something is simple, the creativity takes over and you're going to do many different things. If something is complex, you're putting more time in the complexity of the thing, and the creative outcome is most of the time not that amazing. So let's continue. The audio fragments in the kits have been processed with all kinds of filters, envelopes and LFOs. Some patches have bitrate reduction enabled, some were reversed. Many have been overdriven to make them sound grittier with more texture. Not a single audio fragment stayed the same. Many tweaked to a point that they were only perceivable as clicks and pops. Start and end points were adjusted. Some very short samples were even looped at audio rate in order to create various synthesized sounds like bass lines, leads, or stabs. So, let me tell you, if you have a sound and you take a very, 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 very microscopic loop of the sound and you loop it so fast that it becomes kind of then you have a wave shape that's looped, and that can become a sound, a steady pitch, and with that steady pitch you can alter the pitch and then you have a synthetic sound. So even out of something organic, if you loop it very shortly with a short loop time, and then it becomes a pitch that you can use and actually play with a keyboard. All these preparations were done in my Antwerp, in Belgium, based home studio. Then I got another picture of some of the gear with my little keypad, with my drum computer, a synthesizer, and if you have the liner notes you will have a better view on those instruments. The recording sessions. At the beginning of electronic music production, in big contrast to today's click and drag composing, most artists live performed their work when recording. These multi-track recordings were then slightly edited, shortened and overdubbed before the final version was mixed and mastered. So now everybody that's making music, or almost everybody, has a computer with a program called a DAW, Digital Audio Workstation. It's a program, and you have these audio recordings or digital files or whatever, and you just put them on a transport bar, and you compose music that way. You click, you drag, and you drop, and you put them in the correct position, and so music is made, and it's very visual. But back in the days, most of the time. And they recorded those performances because they actually performed the song. Like Jimi Hendrix recorded his tracks. They performed, they played their songs. And some of the musicians today, they also, the bands, they perform their songs. But many of the bands also, or music producers, they also just, record just a little bit of drums, a little bit of bass, and then start pasting it and making the arrangement while they're recording little pieces, and then copy paste everything. So I approached my creation a little bit more like a performance. So my approach in creating the tracks for the album Discovery was very similar in this regard. After preparing the sequences, I performed the tracks by enabling and muting these sequences, and by applying modulation and effects to the parameters on the fly. So I changed the sound, I changed the sequences, I changed the patterns on the fly and the way I was feeling it at the moment. And that created those tracks, and I recorded it in a session, and afterwards I just edited a few things, but I didn't compose the files in the computer. I composed them live and then did some edits. This technique resulted in an organic track that contained the essence of both human and machine. I went to a peaceful location for about 2 weeks and took along my mobile recording rig and drum machine. This gave me the opportunity to escape the daily burdens of life, and I was able to focus solely on my project. The result of the initial recording was very rhythmical and bass-oriented. The tracks just needed a few overdubs to make the album really shine and feel special. Then a little photo of the studio where I was making these recordings, the mobile studio at the coast, the Belgian coast in De Haan, it's called, where my parents live. And I went there on kind of a holiday, and I took along my gear, and I locked myself up in the guest room, and I actually made the album there, not needing to worry about things like food and other daily chores. So 13 tracks were recorded, 11 made the cut. The recording sessions were held at De Haan, a picturesque village at the Belgian coast. Being in total solitude during the recordings put me in a position to feel like I was living in this cocoon. I almost felt like I could be in space on a mission to explore new music and delve deep into my inner conscious. This imaginative experience certainly had a positive effect on the way the album evolved and how well it all fits together. Being able so soon in the process great vibe during the initial recording sessions, and too many overdubs and edits could definitely have an undesirable effect on the genuineness of the album. Overdubs. I like synths. I actually like them a lot. Keeping in mind, I wanted this album to be quite minimalistic. Some tracks just felt a little bit too basic, in the department of melody and expression especially. So, I took my big modular system, my EV4000S, which is actually an electronic saxophone-like instrument, but with electronic sounds. Waldorf Blofeld, which is a synthesizer, and Strifed, which is also a synthesizer, but a string synthesizer, and added a couple of overdubs with these beautiful electronic instruments. There's always the temptation of overdoing it. I set a limit to the maximum of 3, a lead and 2 pads, a pad and a choirish pad. This really kept me from the temptation of adding too many elements to the tracks. It's like when you mix too many colors, you eventually get gray or brown as a result. Sector. Another technique I used was controlled glitching. I loaded a bass loop in the iPad app called Sector. Sector is some kind of glitching app with lots of sequencing and randomization options available. You're able to divide the loop into sections, hence the name of the program. Speed things up or slow things down and lock everything onto a steady BPM, which is short for beats per minute. There are 3 parts to Sector. The best part is its sequencing. Everything is based on colors. Each part of the loop has a color, and you color some parts of the sequence to change the pattern and give it a lot, some, or no randomization. Leaving steps blank will randomize. Then there's the probability part, called map, where you can draw arrows from one step to another to give them a probability percentage. So when the random factor is activated on those steps, the pattern will jump accordingly to one of those other steps in somewhat a random manner. This is how Sector looks like, and yeah, it's a great app if you're into glitchy electronic music or glitchy acoustic music, but it's of course an electronic app. Last but not least, there is a warp part when you can apply an LFO to modulate each of the steps individually. The LFO can be set to audio rates for audio modulation, oscillation. Combining these functions is complicated but fun and inspiring. I held a jam session in Sector, mangling the bass loops to create various interesting rhythmic parts. Afterwards, I imported everything back into the original session in Logic Pro and cut the new material into building blocks for further composition. A picture of me in the studio back then, when I was young and beautiful. overall sound is the key in getting a deep and detailed soundstage. I adjusted volumes and panning to find the right balance between elements, applying some EQing, compression and limiting to position these elements better in the mix. When the mix is final, the output levels have to be pushed to industry standards using mastering techniques. Mastering is actually doing some more EQing, compression and limiting, preferably using some good outboard equipment. It's the final stage in creating an amazing end product, a work of complex expression. Influences and inspiration. It's hard to make a list containing all the things that had an influence on my music. It is everything around me that affects the way I compose. From my education to the things I like to eat, from the place where I live to the places I would like to go, from the weather to the people that I know. On the other hand, the various sources that inspired me to make this album can be written down with the greatest ease. Science fiction is an obvious source of inspiration, especially with this project. I actually prefer visual content to literature. My style in music is also very cinematic. I think science fiction movies or video games are a good mix of fantasy, technology and design. Blade Runner is a prime example of such a movie. Its retro-futuristic look is an extensive source of inspiration to me. I very much like the nostalgic feelings that surround the movie, and I haven't mentioned its brilliant soundtrack yet. Music inspires me too, although it's always dangerous to subconsciously copy stuff. Discovery is influenced and inspired by artists like Aphex Twin, Amon Tobin, Kraftwerk, Tangerine Dream, and by many jazz records too. Another source of inspiration are the instruments I use. Their workflow has an incredible impact on how a track evolves. I like to experiment with a lot of my equipment and look for new ways to make use of it. Happy accidents are substantial to my productions. They are a big factor in being able to improvise the way I do. And now I will read about the revision I made. Like I mentioned, I made the album in 2014, 2015, and recently, in October 2021, I did a revision of the album, and I now released it finally. So I made a little note about the revision too. Revision. The album was recorded in the summer of 2015. I wrote the original liner notes when the first version of Discovery was finished in February 16. So I missed. It was 15 to 16. Although I might have missed here because I really think I started or had the first idea in 2015. 14, and I probably recorded the album in the summer of 15 and finished it in February 16. That makes sense, I think. And by the end of 2014, I started with the samples of NASA. And in the summer of 2015, I actually recorded those performances because I know the album, it really took a lot of time to make. The thought my creation could and probably would flop caused me a lot of doubt, leading to eventually not releasing the album at all. In the following period, I would occasionally listen to the album and think about the potential it had. It was October 2021 when I decided it was time to rework some of the tracks that felt a bit flat and aged, and work towards an actual release of the album, preferably accompanied by a few music videos. The first video is out there. I will link in the description down below. The next video is coming, so make sure you subscribe to the channel the video is released on to make sure you see the next videos. Check it out after the liner notes, of course. Most of the reworking I did were edits to the cut of the mix to make it all much more dynamically interesting, remastering and tweaking of particular frequencies that began to bother me over time, and about 3 tracks were completely overhauled. This included scrapping some major elements from those tracks, like bass lines, and adding new bass lines, leads, chords, and percussion. I kept the essence, but I also made the tracks more vibrant. The last change to the album was the track order. I think it's an unbelievable important factor that can make or break an album's flow. It was a necessity because the tracks themselves were reworked. Still, the order fits the initial idea perfectly and feels a lot more dynamic and engaging. This revision is written in December 2021, and the album will finally see the daylight in 2022. I would like to thank all the people who are dear to me and who supported me unconditionally. And I would like to thank in advance all the people who will discover, pun intended, my music, enjoy my album, and support me by sharing and caring. Thank you, and enjoy your sonic journey. And then I have a few more pictures of things that involved the album. And the album is produced by Anomaly, me, mastered and published by Dress Code Black, and the copyright is 2022 because the album finally found its way into the world, and hopefully not into the void. So I would like to thank you so much for listening to me talk about the album, reading all those liner notes. I hope you will enjoy the album too if you give it a shot, give it a listen, and tell me in the comment section down below what you think about the album. And maybe next time I will do something else music related, or maybe another ASMR video with lots of whispering, hoping to soothe you, the viewer. And yeah, I would say if you like my content, give it a thumbs up. If you like my album, give it many thumbs up. And yeah, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you sat through all this talking, I would think you like